All right, Ian.
Yeah.
We've been discussing and covering now for a good 2.5 years at least the surging graded game market, Wata graded games, Heritage Auctions, selling these games.
People grade games.
Yes, isn't that kind of a strange thing? Mostly sealed games, sometimes complete in box. And we've been talking and alluding and sometimes pointing out the fact that we thought it was strange that people that are involved in running the auction companies are also involved with grading the games or familiar with them or sometimes working with those people in some way as a consultant or advisor on an executive board, also are the same people buying the games in the same marketplace, and how that's unethical and that's weird. And the first thing that we thought was weird was the $100,000 sale of the Super Mario Brothers second print, the one that eventually ended up on Pawn Stars. That sale happened, what was that, early 2019 about?
Yeah.
That sort of kickstarted a lot of this fervor. And one of the gentlemen involved in that sale, it was public, was Jim Halperin. Jim Halperin was one of the 3 people that bought that cart. Jim Halperin founded Heritage Auctions.
Yes.
So we thought, that's strange. Why is this not being talked about by people? Why are people thinking that there's nothing going on here? And then we saw the growth of what's been happening the past 2 years. Huge auctions, growing prices, insane stuff like Spider-Man for Atari sealed going for a lot of money. Then we come to July. It seems like it was forever ago already when we have a $1.5 million Mario 64, $1 million Zelda, and then we see a $2 million sale that the Rally investment app owned of a not even first or second print run Super Mario Brothers, like a 1987 cellophane sealed one. And what is happening here? And that was an inflection point, I think, in this conversation, was that big auction in July with the $1.5 million Mario 64. Because people were like, we can't explain this.
Right.
Even Dennis Conantwana says, I can't explain why this went for this amount of money. So, and even Heritage Auctions was like, what? So I think that was the point where people started, it should have happened earlier, but that was the point where people started to look into this and wonder what's happening. Mm-hmm. One of those individuals is a man and speedrunner and YouTuber named Karl Jobst. Karl had been following this on the periphery for a while. He has been following our podcast. He used to say, hey, good job talking about this, whatever. But when he saw this, his ears perked up, as everyone should have. And he started investigating. And he put together a 50-minute investigative video that came out on Monday, August 23rd, exposing fraud and deception in the retro video game market. And this is a tour de force of investigative journalism, looking at the history of some of the players here involved in this, who's working for who, their connections. And the thing about this information that Karl put out in this video, and please watch this was all public information. This is stuff that was either searchable. You could go on Google and find it. Some of this stuff was public SEC filings from investment site apps, that records of them buying some of these games. So my main takeaway from it is this. It's not shocking this information came to light. We had alluded to some of this before. Some of this had been known. But it's the level, I think, of the relationships that I was not aware of, and the propping up of certain individuals is what became shocking to me in order to grow this market. And that involved potentially journalists and real publications putting out these articles, which I'll get into, that kind of surprised me, and how much damage they helped do. We're talking about several articles that have been written about these big sales in the past 2.5 years, and the damage those inadvertently probably those journalists did in helping this grow to a point of no return. That's what's shocking to me, because this information was out in the open and any journalist could have found this. Karl should not have been the first person to put together some very easy to find puzzle pieces.
Yeah, the dots weren't obfuscated. They could have been connected pretty much at any time. And I thought it was a very informative video, though. It goes through some of the things that we've talked about. It talks about Jim Halpern's connection to the coin bubble in the 80s, which I think is, which I knew a little bit about, but I think that was the big information for a lot of people, was learning about that this is not his first rodeo.
Yeah, Jim Halpern was involved in the coin market bubble in the 80s, and it bubbled to a point that it has not returned to, even accounting for inflation. It has not gotten back up to where the prices were in the 80s. Think about that. In 35 years, it has not come back to that point, even accounting for inflation. That's insane. So much for that, him and other individuals got fined for some potentially shady stuff.
Yeah, I was watching
the government.
I was watching it last night with Vonnie, and she was just nodding her head in agreement the whole time. I think everyone's got a couple knowledge bases that they're not particularly like. It's not really their thing, but they've just happened to learn about it along the way. And one of Vonnie's is coins, because there is a coin case at comics and stuff. So she has to know about all that stuff, and she doesn't really handle it, but she's learned it all. And yeah, she's like, oh yeah, this is exactly the same thing that happened back then. It was interesting to see all that. And I had family that was really into the coin stuff in the 80s too. I mean, when you think about it, it's crazy because a lot of people were into that coin stuff. I remember that was a very popular hobby. I have all sorts. I've got like 3 or 4 Apple II discs that came from my grandparents' house that have various like coin databases and coin guides and stuff on them. Like it was an extremely popular hobby, pumped up, I think, by people who said this is a way to make a killing.
So this is what Karl revealed in his video. Jim Halpern was into coins in the 80s. He founded one of a couple of coin grading companies to help it.
The first one, the 2 big ones weren't him, but there was one before the 2 big ones that was related to him.
So he was involved with that. He wrote a book about it. Then he founds Heritage Auctions, right, at the time. So he's involved with the grading of the product. He's involved in the auction house. And then it got so big that outside investment money got into it to help build the bubble. Does that sound familiar? Is that not a parallel to what's happening right now? It exactly is. And so when you have the same players involved, you have the same modus operandi happening, because Jim is involved. He helped with Wata. It's the exact same playbook being put into place. Exactly. And of course, the coin market crashed.
What I think one of the things that I did not know about, though, is the speaking of the coin market, which I know isn't like the main focus, but the hedge funds. Didn't know about that. They fucking did hedge funds on coin investment.
Hedge funds put money in, and people lost a lot of money.
Entire hedge funds based on people giving money to other people to invest in coins. That was wild.
So that's a part of the story, but it just shows the players involved, and they had the know-how to create a bubble. They absolutely do. But how else do you create a bubble? He went into the articles that were written about this, not questioning any of the sale prices or the people involved. Hey, $100,000 Super Mario Brothers. That sounds great. Not like glossing over the fact that one of them is the guy that's now they're owning or created the site that's auctioning off these games, and he's also involved with the company grading. So I want to focus on one article here that we didn't really bring up at the time, or I don't remember if we did. It talked about Eric Nierman. He was the dentist that was one of the biggest game collectors. I read the article at the time. I thought it was strange. I'd never heard of Eric. And the reason why you never heard of her, it was a Washington Post article. The reason why you never heard of Eric, or I didn't hear in my past, decades of video game collecting, because he didn't start collecting video games until earlier 2019. He's a speculator.
Yep.
He founded an LLC just to be a speculator. He reveals this in a video that Karl turned up, that he went on like a podcast or conversation.
He literally says, I am creating a market.
I'm creating a market. He went to his neighbors to get investment money for this venture to buy all of these sealed games in 2019. $1 million worth of games he bought in 2019. He didn't collect games before.
We talked about that. I remember.
We did talk about that.
Yeah, we talked about the guy who bought $1 million worth of, I think, $1 million worth of games.
But when you see this article being written, I'm not throwing Jacob Bogage under the bus, But when you see something written like one of the world's most avid video game collectors, you're not one of the most avid video game collectors just based upon the amount of money you spent. If you got into it several months earlier and you are a speculator that is clearly trying to make a profit on this, that does not make you a video game collector. You are a speculator. This guy could have speculated with any other trinket or any other bauble he thought that he could help pump the market on. And he admits that in the video. He admits that. So when you see articles like this being written, like Retro Game Gold Rush, this guy, Eric, holding 2 copies of a sealed game that he had no interest in collecting 2 years before this, all of a sudden. It all goes back to the false narrative they try to raise these speculators that, oh, I'm doing this because I love this. And I always said that, no, I've never met anyone.
This isn't about love of the game.
No. Oh, well, love of the hobby.
Love of the hobby, yes.
Or
I meant the game itself, not like love of the game.
So
it's obviously about a love of investing.
In these articles, you have Heritage Auctions reps show up. You see reps from Wata, usually Dennis Kahn, show up and saying, oh, these prices are going to go to the moon. And it's like, it's so transparent, but it's like, why at the time did not anyone think that this was the game plan? Like, this is what the game plan was. This happens in other hobbies. It happened before. These are all people interconnected with each other. Why, first of all, why did this article get written? How was the Washington Post and the author, Jacob, how was he made aware that Eric was spending $1 million on these games?
Right.
To even write an article about this. This is a propaganda piece for the speculators and for Wata and for Heritage Auctions. That's what it comes across as. But this is one of several articles that was written where the authors did not do any diligence, it seems, to really look at, is there anything behind the surface of this? What are the actual motivations of the players involved? Right. Is this on the up and up? And that's what is infuriating to me about this. That Karl did all this work that should have been done for him the past 2.5 years. Like, it should have been done in some way, shape, or form. And for the most part, in almost all the articles written, save from, I think the New York Times did an article, they got some pushback a little bit. You know,
everyone was very, very willing to take this at face value because no one wants to accept that this sort of nonsense is coming into their hobby.
You think that's what it is?
Yes. Everyone wants to think that
it's a naivety.
I think it's naivety. I think everyone wants to think that their hobby is different and that it's not being taken over by people who outside forces that have no interest.
Outside forces and rich people that are just trying to get richer, that don't care about it. They're going to strip mine it and leave it for dead.
I think sometimes people want that, they think it's going to validate the hobby or lift it up a little bit, so they go with it for a little bit, but it doesn't.
When did money ever equate to importance for a hobby? Like, when did that ever make something better in your eyes? It's like when I collected baseball cards when I was a kid, I didn't care what the cards were worth. It was just the hobby. When I was into comic books, it was like you focus on what you're collecting first. You worry about the value the secondary part of it. And the same with video games. The fact that we have a $1 million video game doesn't make video game collecting any greater in my mind. It has nothing to do with it. And it's such a weird, I don't know, it's like a falsehood that it helps the hobby or it makes it more important. It's just, again, it helps rich people get richer. That's what it does. Yeah. And it happened with comics 10, 15 years ago. They pumped up that market, after, the MC movies come out, and then there's market manipulation going on there. I mean, I said it before, there's been market manipulation with any hobby. It's happening with sports cards right now. It's happening probably with Magic and Pokemon cards. It happens with everything. Mm-hmm. Just because a Pokemon card goes for $1 million doesn't make Pokemon better in anyone's eyes.
It doesn't legitimize Pokemon.
It doesn't legitimize it. Video games is already one of the biggest industries in the world. I was going to
say, video games have been legitimized by the fact that it overtook movies in terms of, like, well, again, that's linking it to money, but there are other metrics by which you can say that
everyone
the hobby
plays
has been
video
legitimized.
Legitimized? Everyone plays video games. There was a point in time where video games was a niche thing. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, entertainment medium in the world.
Yeah.
Video games. So that to me is more important. Not necessarily the money, but the money reflects the amount of interest in people doing it. So my takeaways are this. There's been a dereliction of duty amongst journalists, mainstream and game journalists, when it comes to this coverage. I feel like a fucking crazy person talking about this stuff for years with Ian, because I feel like people don't believe us. I feel like I'm on an island, not just with this, with other topics, but like I feel like I've had arguments in person with people I respect about.
We
this
love
stuff.
islands.
But
we love being on an island.
I seem like a crazy person when I'm, one of the only people with Ian pointing this stuff out with any. Not saying we have a huge reach, but like,
you don't
I
need to
feel like
feel
I'm fucking
crazy. You just bide your time until it comes to light, because it's always going to come to light.
But like, I just feel like I feel like people think I'm an insane person. Yeah, people that we know in the community were like, Pat's insane. He's like a conspiracy theorist or whatever, and it's like. I'm just tired of it. But thankfully now other people have been looking at this, including a very big person on Twitter, a best-selling political author, Seth Abramson, who I didn't know was following our podcast.
No, I didn't know that either.
For a long time.
Crazy.
I tweeted at him a couple times about, hey, what's your favorite? He's sometimes one time he did like an AMA thing on Twitter. I said, hey, what's your favorite game console, whatever? Because Seth, I started following Seth when he had less than 1,000 followers. Seth got the prominence he was one of the first people, again, not at mainstream journals. He connected all the dots between the Russian collusion with the Ukraine stuff and all the election stuff. Like, he was one of the guys that did that way before the mainstream media. And he's written books, and he has like almost 1 million Twitter followers. A few years ago, he had like almost no Twitter followers. So it's like, I was following him because like, oh, I saw his stuff earlier. He seemed reasonable. He does investigative journalism, but online, basically, piecing together stuff the same way Karl has done. But the Wata stuff, this is like an intersection of interest. The Wata stuff started to pique his interest as well. And he started looking into historical prices. He's also thinking it's weird there's been no population reports. And how with population reports, you could reveal that this stuff isn't rare that's being auctioned off. Just like the Spider-Man 2600. Well, we know that's not rare. There's a sealed game or two coming up every single auction. There's a lot more behind it. So Seth did a great piece of work. That's for free on his site, where he's tracked all the sales of sealed NES games just to get a feel for what's out there. But he also revealed something that I did not personally know about. He's been going on Facebook groups and trying to engage with these speculators and people, and obviously they've been extremely hostile towards him, and he's been taken aback by how hostile they've been towards him, because they realize that the truth deflates the value of these games long term. Right. So it comes out. But I did not realize that at one point in time, the information was available in a roundabout way on the population reports were available on Wata if you knew how to search and get the data. I had no idea.
Neither did I. That was new to me.
So because obviously Wata knows what's been passing through their hands.
Oh, of course.
Obviously. They know the number of games per system, what grades they are. They know that. So there was one point in time when this information was made public. It was gathered and made public on what used to be Nintendo Age, Video Game Age. So this information got out there and was posted, and it was deleted and from Facebook groups. It sounds like it was deleted from website forums. It was wiped.
Yeah,
like it didn't exist.
They don't want you to have that because it ruins it ruins opportunities to make money.
It ruins this rocket trajectory they've been on. If you realize that, hey, maybe there's really, I don't know, hundreds of this sealed game out there, or even 50 of this sealed game, or even 10. When you have real numbers and information to potential buyers, it might give them pause.
Well, and they showed I feel like the documentary. I mean, it was almost.
Documentaries.
Yeah. The video showed the thing that I always love to talk about, personally love to talk about on here when we'd go through the Heritage Auctions, and that was the decline of the Spider-Man on the
2600.
Atari 2600. That's what happens when population reports get out. That's not a population report, but people were pretty quick to figure out, okay, there's a lot of these out here. We don't need to do this anymore. And you watch the price go from 9,000 to 850 something.
Yeah, lost 90% of the value.
Yeah.
Within several months. We talked about it.
We watched it in real time. I mean, I laughed. I always looked forward to the next Spider-Mans because they were always going to be low.
Yeah, last year we saw it decline.
Yeah, with every one that was out, with exception of one, I think, where it went from like 1,700 like up to 2,200 or something. But it was a solid decline. This
is what Seth said on his Twitter thread. There are whispers that certain sellers have been able to get non-public population report data, an indication of illicit market manipulation, as population report data is insanely valuable in a collectibles market, and those who have that data have an enormous edge. Exactly. at one point, which is why you shouldn't be buying and selling the games you're part of the grading company of. Sure. You shouldn't be involved. Now we've seen it happen with multiple individuals. At one point, Wata had an API leak. Their website interface was delivering game-by-game pop report data to individuals who went on the site and liked or tracked individual games. The leak was quickly plugged. It was a coding issue, but the data got out and made a splash. What the data showed was that a vanishingly small number of games were being graded as a percentage of each console's game library. Then it goes into that. It wasn't an illegal hack. It showed that in 3+ years in operation, Wata had graded the most graded NES game approximately 750 times. 750 times before that leak got plugged.
Wow.
So Seth did a good job putting together information he got, but he's now using it. Unfortunately, he has to go off of the Heritage Auction data, which is obviously a small part of what's actually been graded. It's probably only 10-15%. If I had to guess, 20% of stuff that's been graded has come up for sale. It's probably less than that.
Sure.
People are probably holding on to stuff.
Oh yeah.
It's minutia. That's why when you see like, oh, Super Mario 64 sealed, you think that there's not a lot more of those? You don't think that? You don't think there's a lot more of even 9.0s? There's not at least a handful more of those?
Gotta be at least some.
It's gotta be some. So, yeah, go watch that video. Do you have any other thoughts about it? It's an extremely important video. It's making waves already, but I really hope that game journalists really realize that their job is not to help other people make money. Their job is to help report the truth.
Sure.
And not to think that, oh, we're in a bull market and that makes video games better because we see rich people getting richer. That's not what it's supposed to be about.
Yeah. I mean, no, I don't really have much else to say about it, but I did think it was great. It was a good video.
You like your little cameo in the Karl video?
No, don't like it. I was very, very high. I have no problem with being
in the video.
In there.
You're high, or
no? I have no problem with being in the video. It's not me being angry at Karl. But when I am very high, the last thing I want to do is see myself on TV when I'm not expecting it. I'm sitting there with Vonnie, and I'm like, oh, all right.
How did you like my hair? It was puffier than usual. It was humid that night when I recorded.
It was real puffy.
It was humid. I looked at my footage. I'm like, my hair looks like I look like a wig. That's how puffy it looked.
It was very puffy.
All right. Well, good job. Good guy.
My grandma's hair used to do that when it would get real humid.
Thanks, Ian. We'll end on that note. Now a million people are going to see my hair in that state. Thanks for the opportunity, Karl, and also Sean from Reserved Investments, who also added his expertise.
No, I like listening to that guy talk.
Sean's great. Sean's a good guy, and he knows about the coin market as well. He was around to see that.